Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we are on part 2 of our series where it's basically Courtney through glue. Anyway, go back. This is a reminder that this is the second part of a 2-part series. If you want more context, please go back to the first part. But yeah, before we jump right into things, as a reminder, if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. We're also on YouTube, so go ahead and send us a comment and a like and a subscribe and a bell and all the other things that robots need that give them like sexual powers, I guess. I don't know how it works. We're also on Twitter at Let's Worldbuild, and I'm not going to say it's anything else but Twitter. So we're on Twitter over at Let's Worldbuild. We've also got a Discord if you want to come and chat with us on Discord. That'd probably be a little bit more appropriate if you want a direct question asked, or if you want to come share your own world. You don't need us to build it. You just want to chat about it. That's fine too. Come and join our Discord. That's what it's there for. And of course, if you're feeling particularly generous, like our submitter, Gluax, longtime patron, longtime friend of the show, one Gluax, then you can go to our Patreon and give us money as a thank you, or just because you're feeling generous today. You know, I mean, you get good stuff out of it too. Too Hot for Broadcast. You get 2 episodes for your prompts instead of 1. The Aphid Lounge, right? A fabulous monthly podcast where we talk a little bit more outside of just world building. It's a nice chill vibe overall. And with all of that out of the way, let's dive right back into our prompt. Last time we left off, we had a twist, and the twist was someone is manipulating everything from behind the scenes, and it's not who you expect. So, Courtney, why don't you go ahead and start us off by helping us reconcile the twist with this one? What were you thinking? Who is behind this dastardly time tachyon crystal world that we've got going on here that's also got a world war and children's soldier? Again, Courtney, you wrote that. Okay, but anyway, what is or who is behind everything? What do you got?
I still don't quite know. So I struggled with this one because it felt like we already established a pretty complex scope last time with like the child lich time traveler gerontocracy that's in control of everything.
Yeah, tachyon liches, absolutely.
Yeah. So I didn't fully flesh it out, but my general idea was that there's some sort of additional manipulation going on by way of telepathy through radio waves. Because the magic involves seeing and manipulating waves on the electromagnetic spectrum. And like one thought that I had that I'm not positive about yet, but we could flip this whole thing and have it be that now a child or a group of children has realized what's going on with the Child Lich Council, and they know that they can't actively attack them. So instead they're like sending subtle telepathic messages to the council, trying to keep them from continuing this war.
Oh, that's cool.
Dooming everything.
No, that's actually really interesting. So I'm going to be real with you guys. I, like you, Courtney, I really struggled with this concept. So in my note, I wrote Space Whales ? So I think that the second concept that you have here is a lot stronger. Daniel, what did you have? Did you come in with a strong concept, or did you have like sexy goblins circled in your notes? What do we got here?
The last thing that Courtney said about the war, can meet the war going, made me think of kind of a 1984 situation. And so my thought is, we have this obvious villain in the tachyonic lich people, children, whatever. They're also in the background, so not really obvious. Like they're secretive, but there is a gerontocracy, and I assume they have some connection, not some awareness of them. So I thought perhaps there is a motivation to keep the war going, and I would imagine maybe it has to do with the property or the ownership of the property, which are these children and people who benefit from it. So I thought maybe there's a class of instructors or people within the military that stand to benefit from this continuing on. And maybe they have, they're influencing the way the institution of training children is set up and keeping it going. So they're manipulating both. They're giving the gerontocracy what it needs because it has its own goals. Right. And they're also raising the children and controlling them. And in the way they're in the middle, and it's as long as it continues, they have their jobs and their mission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Like, yeah, the engine of war is absolutely a great way to look at this, like a Raytheon or like war industrial complex type of situation going on. That's a really interesting way of looking at it, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because it fleshes out the setting more because, like you said, the liches do have they want to keep getting this tachyonic stuff to continue their own power, but everybody else involved, this gives them a motivation too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it also feels like you actually give some power back to the adults, right? Because like in our previous episode, we kind of did like make it all about the kids and all about like the liches and stuff like that. And this at least allows for like, I mean, there's an inherent faction involved with that, right? That there's now a genuine power struggle. And you can see why that particular faction might actually have power within this world as well. And their motivations are clear. Yeah. All that works really well. Damn. So it's not space whales, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at here.
But I mean, that was your reconciliation, so we've got to include it somehow, right?
I said space whales ? And frankly, the question mark is an open interpretation of, dear God, please, my brain is melting out of my eyes, like that kind of thing.
I wonder if you take it metaphorically, like you're saying, perhaps space whales equate to the unknown machine. We have these machines that were built, right, by the military that have an esoteric purpose. Perhaps they factor into.
Yeah.
I just want to say, God bless my co-hosts for taking my dumb shit idea and taking it seriously. This is the level of professionalism and creativity that I envy and adore in them. So like, just take a moment, everyone who's listening, and appreciate this level. Okay.
I was thinking too, like, yeah, similarly, maybe there are things that have been constructed in space that are like sending certain waves down to the planet that's doing something.
Oh, your satellite. Like you're talking about the radio waves thing. Perhaps it's in a satellite.
Oh, so when we say space whales, we're actually talking about like ships, like spaceships.
You call it W.H.A.L.E. in a cap, right? The military calls it the whale, right? But it's the satellite that does something. Like you were saying with the radio waves. Maybe this inner government faction that's kind of keeping the war going uses this in some way.
Oh, and so maybe like the group that I talked about, or like the single kid that I talked about, they figure out a way to like hack into it or something.
Yeah.
Because I had imagined that they were just kind of on the ground, like sending these long range radio waves. But if they could somehow get it into like a literal satellite, that would certainly be more effective.
It could be an acronym.
An acronym that we will not satisfy. So make it up on your own, folks. That actually sounds really cool. And I'm also now thinking of like, can you do something like an orbital like cannon, but using like tachyonic crystals or something like that? Because that to me sounds like apocalyptic, right? Like if the whale actually becomes operational and you are able to focus tachyonic energy through something like an orbital spaceship, like that sounds like whoever controls that controls the world to me.
Yeah. The idea of a
I'm trying to
tachyonic.
figure out an acronym in the background.
I knew it. I
give it to ChatGPT.
I can literally hear Daniel like typing shit. It's like, all right, we're gonna do it. And I'm like, God damn it,
That's
Daniel.
what I'm doing. Sorry to interrupt you, Courtney. Go ahead.
Of course, that's what you're doing.
So the idea of a tachyonic orbital cannon is horrifying.
Right?
Damage that it could do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, especially because when I kind of reveal my faction later on, I'm like thinking about like we didn't really get into the war tech enough, in my opinion, right? Because Daniel's tenet was like this is technology that has the ability to manipulate time, right? So well, it was a mixture between us, but still, and so like I wanted to get a little bit more into that. And frankly, my faction pivots nicely into the idea that there is like a secret kind of industrial complex going on. So if y'all don't mind, I think I'm actually going to step in, especially because Daniel's distracted making his whale acronym, right?
I mean, that does sound like a perfect segue, but yes, I am working on my my whale.
No, okay, so this is what I've got, right? I was thinking that similarly, I'm like, there's got to be some like kind of big war council or some kind of like weapons developer, manufacturer or something like that. And I also imagine, okay, I'm getting too far out of myself. Here's the concept that I'm running with thus far. There is a group of children who are failed experiments, right? Essentially, what happened is there was an experiment to see if they could somehow get older people, or people who have lost their ability to use magic, and like transport them back in time so they could be old enough to like have a liaison who can communicate, but young enough so they can still be amongst the younger kids, right? What ended up happening is this organization fucked up a bunch of kids and have basically created like a Groundhog Day situation almost, where imagine that you as a person are stuck in a fixed point of time. So stuff will change around you and you will always revert to a certain age and mindset and stuff like that. And this inevitably will either drive people mad or create a situation where they stop taking reality seriously. And so either way, it makes them incredibly dangerous. And that's basically what I've got. Like, these were failed ambassadors to the youngers, and now like they've just gone completely AWOL. What do y'all think about my failed military experiment?
Are they like still used by the government in some capacity, or are they like renegades?
I think that what end up happening is that they're like, oh, we're going to control them. And then that failed almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happened since is that they're still trying to, and I think that's why the faction keeps growing, is that they're still trying to perfect that technology, right? Like, this time we're going to get it. We're really close this time. And they fail.
Just try and revert people to the child state is the goal of the project.
Exactly.
And they're a failure of that. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the concept.
Yeah.
Yes. What I think is interesting is the like being stuck in a fixed point in time in your life, like in reverting to that over and over again, like a Groundhog Day situation, but not quite like a Groundhog Day situation,
Yeah, I like that. And like, what did you picture as their kind of current role in the world? The ones who had been experimented on. I mean,
I'm gonna be real with you.
Yeah.
They're chaos agents. They are like,
Mm-hmm.
you could have some of them be like more lucid. You can have some of them be completely out of control. Their initial role, I kind of imagine them as like matrons or like enforcers of the adult's will. Like, it's their attempt at creating order amongst children.
Okay.
So I imagine that some of them have, or perhaps most of them have, fascistic tendencies towards that. Like, I'm the boss of you. You need to listen to what I say, that kind of thing. But again, because they've effectively become unmoored from time and reality, some of them have just broken entirely from that.
I could see the creation of a splinter cell that maybe at one time was, well, maybe part of this project, and it's led by one of these chaos agents, and they're like a radical faction in the military that the military is trying to stop. But they like a small cell that has a particular task, but it's no longer beholden to anyone.
Right.
So maybe I could see this chaos agent trying to gather kids who they can pluck away from the program and then cultivate in their own way, because they no longer believe in the project.
So like a Black Ops team that's gone rogue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That is actually quite interesting. I'm digging that concept quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then their motivations could be all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I'm interested in as well, is like I'm very tired of the trope of like, there's the barbarian tribe or the out of control, like in Borderlands, right? They're like just the psychers and the mutants and stuff like that. I wanted a faction that was inherently dangerous, but I didn't want them to just be like mindless goons. Like, I wanted something interesting about them, but I also wanted something that's like, yo, they're fucking dangerous. You don't go in that territory type of thing,
I wonder if their potential ultimate goal relates to the WHA.L.E acronym that Daniel's creating, like that orbital tachyonic laser thing.
I left them vague enough to like have their motivations not really be clear. So yeah, I'm down with something like that for sure.
Yeah, like if this person is in the military, has the knowledge that exists and potentially how to get to it, and like, I mean, they're not probably the most mentally stable, given what they've gone through, and like, I could see them wanting revenge on the people that did this to them, or maybe they want to create more people like them. And what better way to do both of those things than with a tachyonic orbital weapon?
Oh, I inflict my suffering on everyone because that's the only thing I know. Like, oh, if I'm going to be stuck in a fixed point in time, everyone else is going to be stuck in that fixed point in time, like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it could be something like that. It could also, as you're saying that, thinking like, what if they think using that will fix them? But of course, probably won't.
Well, if we zoom out for a second, like what is this war about, right? So like there's we don't really know, right? We haven't really defined what the war is about. There's a war that happens, and it might just be arbitrary and totally constructed, kind of like the Iraq War, right? So there's an ongoing war that's happening, and we have kids who, what's their power? I forget how that works.
It's like kind of chronomancy and also stuff on the electromagnetic spectrum. It's like a blend of stuff.
Right. So from what I remember, you introduced the idea that they're using like machinery, right? Ancient machinery through tachyonic crystals is what we ended up going with.
Right. And they're the only ones who can control it.
Correct. And Courtney's tenet was they can see on the electromagnetic spectrum, which gives them the ability to manipulate these tachyonic crystals. And then my tenet suggested that as they get older, their ability to see these fields gets weaker until they can no longer see it.
Right. So the older they get, they lose their ability to see things. Now, I guess we haven't defined like, what does the war get out of having these kids at their disposal? I know they can freeze sections of locations with these time bomb sort of things because they're using the machines to do that.
Right.
I think the answer to what does this whale do and how do the chaos agent kids, what do they want, has to do with what do they get out of the war. We know that the geriatric tachyonic liches are aging, they are able to age backwards, right? That's how that works.
Or kind of retain their like child brain, even though they're
old. Yes. Okay. So and they're about trying to keep things in stasis, but they have some nefarious intention. I think we need to answer some of the big pictures to really blend this in.
Okay, I have a question. This is going to sound weird. Did I use the idea that I had where it's like, hey, there are liches or there are individuals who age in both directions, like in cycles. So like they'll get really old and then they'll revert back to being really young and then they bounce back and forth in like a infinite loop. Did I use that idea, or is that something that I was like going to use as a faction, like kept to myself?
I don't remember that from last time.
Okay.
Your chaos agents would be a candidate for that if they were attempting to de-age them, but then maybe they go up and down kind of arbitrarily. That would be interesting because now they're like changelings, you know, they can kind of move between both environments.
That's true.
Because all of this rambling makes me think that perhaps the whale device, we know, sends about some sort of signal that manipulates the kids in some ways because it's by some rogue military faction inside. But what if there is a purpose of it that they're not aware of? Like, for example, if the chaos agents know that if this were beamed on the whole world, it could like revert everyone's or do something like that.
Sure.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. And that's where we can talk about like the dueling machinations and the intent between the kind of war profiteers and the kind of tachyonic liches that we're dealing with, right? Like who is initially responsible for creating this thing and who has the real power or knows the real intent behind it. Right. Okay. Let's put a pin in this for the time being because we have other questions and other factions we need to explore, right? So, Courtney, why don't you hit us with your faction this time, and then maybe we can reconcile all of this in the main storyline quest that we're going to get to later.
All right. Again, I kind of struggled here almost because there were like so many options of where to go with the electromagnetic spectrum and the powers and everything we established last time. So I ended up kind of throwing out the magic for my faction, and I focused on the moms instead who give birth.
I knew you were going to do this. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So yeah, I focused on the moms who give birth to these magical kids. And last time we'd talked about how humanity is largely sterile, and so birth itself is a rare resource. And I pretty much want freedom fighter moms who are sick of the possibly Handmaid's Tale-esque treatment they've received and are kind of guerrilla fighters away from civilization, trying to raise any kids they might have away from this military, keep them out of the war. and potentially stop the war itself.
That's fucking cool. I like that a lot, actually. That's really cool. Kind of like a gynocracy going on or something like that, like the separate faction. No, that's really awesome. Like, because I can totally see like a group of moms getting together and like we can't let this happen anymore. Like, hell no, like cannot let it happen. Vive la resistance, et cetera, et cetera. Like, no, that's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, and like one of the things we talked about last time too is the possibility that like the mothers themselves have a military rank along with like the caretakers of the kids, and like how even if that was the case, they'd still be kind of a victim to the system as a whole. So like I could see like these captain or whatever level mothers eventually being like, wait a second, like there has to be a better way. This isn't really what we envisioned for ourselves.
And if we look at like the kind of war industrial complex as a whole, right? Like we're not looking at it as though it's a skeleton that's built strong or anything like that. We can look at this thing as it's like leaky and porous.
Yeah.
And so, you're going to have like a group of mothers whose whole rank and job is like effectively creating, like an underground of like, hey, let's get you over here. And then like they smuggle them out and they can do it as best as they can, and like that is a really interesting thing. And it's like, God, the emotion I'm feeling just thinking about a woman who's in this resistance, whose job it is to pick which mother and which child goes out and gets away from this hellscape. Like the pain, the guilt, all of that together, like that's a strong character, if you ask me.
Yeah. And like last time, we were talking about like how it's probably like a larger group of kids to like one or two caretakers, one or two kind of overseer mother types. So it's like they rarely ever actually get to interact with their own children. So like the idea of being able to actually do that, if you're able to get the freedom. I mean, of course, the kids still can't communicate with their parents because of that language thing in the prompt. But there's still like just the contact and like the touch and being around each other.
And not watching your children being used as a war weapon.
Yep.
I think that's also, there's some value there as well, Courtney. 100%. Yeah, that's good. Oh man.
It makes me think too, like the subset of mothers must be trying to preserve a perspective in society that is not common. Because, so for example, the prompt says that children are thought of as property, right? This would be a pervasive ideology. So I'm thinking the opposite of that ideology, that children are not property, they're actually, our offspring that must be thought of as people, must be a subversive sort of thing. So then these mothers who are not beholden to the ideology must be operating in secret, for one, like you're suggesting, but also like it makes you think of, for example, Children of Men, and what's her name? I love that actress. I forget her name.
Julianne Moore.
Yes. So her attitude was somewhat defiant, but also she had to operate with mirrors, and she was like secretive. Like I could see that kind of environment, but it's under the microscope of this whole military apparatus that the mothers operate inside of.
Yeah.
There's also like, we could go two different ways with that. One of like you said, they recognize that children are people too, and they should have rights and not just be used as mindless child soldiers. But on the other hand, it could be that the mothers see it as their property, not the military's property. So it's kind of like we want to get away for our benefit, not necessarily our children's benefit.
Right.
So I don't know which, like I could see both things happening even.
I'm more interested in that one because I feel like the culture, in order to get to the position that children are property for our culture, like you have to go a long distance, right? So I wonder if like the closest we can get to seeing them as people is they are to be groomed to a certain purpose that's not for the general military use.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask why not both, right? Like why not leave it up to the moms themselves once they get out of this society? Once they get underground, it's kind of up to them. And I like the conflict that is there if we allow both to exist.
Yeah, because like that could be a fracture point within this faction itself. And that in turn causes danger to the faction, because if they're splintering, then that makes them more of a potential target of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then of course you get like cells, right? Like it's not like a massive organization. They're like cells of these people. And then, you meet one and you think, oh, all of them are like very caring and loving. And then you meet the other and it's like, no, they're trying to take my property away and it's my right to use this property as I see fit.
Exactly.
Right? Like, yeah. It's like, oh, come and take it. But instead of a gun, it's a child, like that's,
yeah.
From my cold dead womb, says the mom. Oh my God. Anyway,
on that note, Daniel,
tell us all about your womb related faction that you've got lined up for us.
I was just thinking about the instructors who are between the mothers and the children, the ones that we had established kids that were sort of their instructors. And so I was going to call them the tutors. And they might be the not failed versions of the chaos agent experiment that you're talking about. That they weren't at the age and they probably weren't part of that project, but they're either kids that are the current instructors who can communicate, but they're on the verge of losing their power, or they're former kids in the military who have survived but have lost their power, and now their new designation is to train the kids since they understand. They're the most recent to understand them.
I see, like, first of all, Daniel, love the idea 100%, right? I can see, like, because if we're looking at this thing like an apparatus, right? Like these children are effectively like Gestapo or like Hitler Youth, right? Then why not have like, oh yeah, we tried to find the most loyal ones and then turn them into my faction. But like the baseline created is your faction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like they might pluck certain ones for that experiment to bring them back to their youth.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But they're like, I'm thinking this is the most standard tutor that is meant to train the others,
Yeah, we were definitely on the same wavelength there, Daniel, for sure. Yeah.
So they have to have a great discipline, but also they have a more recent understanding of how the kids think.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of in agreement with you, Daniel, that if there is this kind of like dichotomy or this kind of structure that exists between like children and adults, like there needs to be some kind of like way that the adults are attempting to take control. Right. And I think that through other children, like I was thinking of like Sallow. I was also thinking of like, what's her name? The she bitch of the SS. Do you know that movie? Anyone?
Ilsa. It sounds familiar.
Ilsa. Yeah. So it's stuff like that where it's like, you need someone who's going to be in control, who's not going to be like necessarily in the military, right? Just an edifice of that power, right? Yeah.
I could see Daniel, your faction and mine being kind of strongly opposed. Like yours ends up being the most dangerous thing to mine because they're the ones kind of constantly around and keeping an eye on things. And because they've already proven themselves as like ultra loyal to the state, they have no qualms with even turning in their own mother for insubordination.
Yeah. But then we established in the first episode there's tension between them because there's the mother who probably has some baseline human interest in their child, even if they deny it. And the tutor is far more removed and has already been indoctrinated,
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a lot of interesting baselines. One question I do kind of want to come back to though, we've reconciled, right? We're feeling good about the reconciliations and we're feeling good about the factions, right? We're both good. Okay. I want to go back to a question that Daniel raised earlier in that, what is this war actually about, right? Like, I do see kind of value in seeing a 1984 style, the war never ends because they need to maintain control type of thing, right? I can see that as a possibility. I can also see it as a genuine war, but the thing about war is that it's got to end eventually, right? Like, there's no such thing as perpetual war because it's exhausting and it's really destabilizing to populations. So I would like to answer that question if we can.
Yeah, especially with the sterility issue.
Yeah.
And like, what are the sides of this war? We still haven't really figured that out because we have like the Lich Council who's kind of making it continue and the military industrial complex that wants it to continue for their own benefit. But like, what are the different sides in the war itself?
Right. What are the perceived sides, or what's the propaganda side to it, right? Like, yeah.
Perhaps I'm wondering if maybe we can not answer the question, but in a clever way. So consider this.
Right.
Suppose there was a war that had a legitimate purpose a long time ago. And in the process of that war, the trigger of MAD, mutual destruction was launched. So everyone was launching nuclear weapons at each other, and we were facing total apocalypse. But the use of these weapons and those time bombs froze those bombs. And so the war really is a cold war to not let those time bombs go off because it will kill everyone.
Okay, can we also have it be like a race against time? Like those bombs will eventually go off. They're just not, they're not in stasis. They're in incredibly slow moving time.
Yeah, or I mean, it would be like splitting hairs. Like either it's like they're time frozen, right? But it can't go on forever, right? It can't forever be in stasis. Yeah. So these machinations are between whatever countries there are. They've long forgotten their beef with each other, and they probably, they're nation states. They're always plotting against each other. Right, but the impetus to throw nuclear weapons at each other is long ago over. Now at this point, it's a matter of how do we keep these things from exploding on each other.
Yeah, I like that.
The impetus is over because they've already launched the nuclear weapons.
Yeah, they know they're all fucked already.
Right, and, which I love as a concept.
Me too.
Right? Like that's so good. Yeah. Okay.
And I think that pleads into the geriatric children because they have a longing to go back, right? Sort of. Yeah. And the military has to function, otherwise the whole world will end. That's how they view themselves,
And the liches themselves are effectively immortal. So, you'd never want to reign over a pile of ash, right? Like you want to have a kingdom to rule over. And so that's the incentive there as well, to like find a way to get around this oncoming apocalypse that, they basically started.
And that radiation from maybe the countermeasure of blocking everything in time, which is what created the children originally. I don't know the order of things, but it seems that the population becoming sterile and then living longer, it's all a consequence of trying to keep bombs from blowing off,
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe the whale then is the solution that they've come up with.
I mean, I have a name for it already.
Daniel, no, you don't.
I sure do.
It. You don't. No, I don't want to hear it.
And it can make sense. It can make sense in a Star Trek sense.
I'm very curious.
I don't want to hear it, Daniel.
It even uses the word tachyon in it, and there's not even a word.
How? This is because there's an acronym.
There's multiple ways to say tachyon, and I have one of those words that works with this.
All right, what is it?
It is a weakly interacting hadron anti-telephone and long-distance electrometer.
I forgot about the anti-telephone thing.
So my reasoning here, and this is just pop physics, but weakly interacting hadron sometimes can be like or hadron can be a candidate for like a dark matter or some weakly interacting particle. Anti-telephone refers to tachyonic things. So time. And then long distance electrometer just measures voltage, but hey, why not? So
might as well.
A giant version of that. So weakly interacting hadron, anti-telephone, and long distance electrometer.
Can I express to you how dumb I am? Can I just reveal to you how truly dumb I am as a human? When you said weekly, I thought you meant temporal week.
Oh, like week by week.
Yeah, I did too at first. Yeah,
the only one. Week as in it interacts weakly with other particles.
No. That makes a lot more sense. But I definitely thought you're like, wait, so this shit happens every week. That is how dumb I am. So yeah, I'm glad that we went over that.
You're not alone, don't worry.
Thank you. I'm glad
they're called WIMPs, weakly interacting.
So they're wimpy whales, is what I'm hearing.
Wimp whales.
Massive particles, weakly interacting massive particles.
All right. So we've got the whole setup. We've got to bring it all home. What's the main storyline here, and how are we integrating all of the factions that we've come up with thus far?
Like, would it be a squadron that's like tasked with somehow diffusing these bombs? Or is it like a rebel group that's trying to end the war and maybe they aren't aware of what's at stake if it were to end?
I think it's definitely got to be whale. Whatever it is, it's got to be whale related. Like Daniel's acronym can't be just like used in vain here, right? It's got to be used in some.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I imagine that one of their goals is to activate the Space Whale and do something with it.
Mm-hmm. I like the second option, that there is a faction trying to end the war for good reasons, but they're unaware that the war continues because the whole world will end if it ends.
Yeah. So how does that work though? Like, how does the war itself keep these bombs from going off? Is it like the constant use of magic energy around them?
Okay. It creates like a big buffer shield.
Okay.
Like, and like it kind of builds to the point that I was trying to get at earlier, where it's like if it's an incredibly slow moving, like annihilating explosion, then the constant use of the tachyons is it's the only thing creating what is effectively like an ozone around the world itself, right?
Yeah, I think it's those two factors together. It's like continually dropping time bombs, right, will help keep the individual warheads intact, right? But I bet also, in order to continue to drop time bombs, you have to keep the apparatus of war in place, which means money, political influence, gathering resources, which means you have to keep the military going and interested and invested, and all the countries invested in the war. So I think it's as much a political effort as it is literally having to drop the bombs as well, the time bombs.
I've got to admit, I was not expecting this prompt to be as filled with intrigue as it is, right? It is like remarkably complex in terms of like what's actually going on behind the scenes. Because if you were to run this as a game, right? If this is a main storyline quest, it's like the propaganda is going to be, it's time to end the war. Let's go fight the, like whatever
made up countries there are.
Yeah, it's like whatever bad word they use for their enemy, right? And then, like obviously you're gonna have a bunch of young kids and like a bunch of older people doing their diligence, doing their work to try and have children. And then, you watch this squadron of literal children, kind of like run through time bombs. And it's like, imagine if they tried to shoot Saving Private Ryan, but with all children cast, like that's kind of what I have in my head right now, right?
So if we're putting the pieces on the table, then we've got some kind of faction that is naively trying to overturn things. It sounds like one of our options for that, the two options, the moms who've broken away or the chaos agents, maybe both. We also have gerontocracy that wants to keep things as they are. So they're the obvious enemy, but not the real one. And then we have tutors. They're the actual operators, but they're not necessarily conniving. They're just part of the machine, right? That's the main players.
Okay. Tell me if you think this is an interesting concept, right? Can we have it so the tutors are like the main characters in this whole situation? I think looking at this whole thing through their lens is probably the most interesting or unique perspective, right? Because if you look at it from anywhere else, you see the whole machinery as it is, like the whole apparatus as it is. And then if you start with the tutors, then you kind of get a very narrow focus. And I think that narratively, that's a lot more interesting to me to kind of focus on.
What if there's a tutor tasked with finding a chaos agent? Sorry, Courtney, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I do like the idea of focusing on the tutors. It kind of makes me think of like computer games like Fallout, where you start in a enclosed vault and you haven't really seen what's outside. If you're playing a tutor in whether it's a video game or an RPG, like you start maybe noticing things that seem off about certain people, and and like maybe it's kind of left up to you. Like, do you turn them in to the secret police, or do you ask for more and like look more into it? And that could be a really cool way of like learning more about the world and what's actually out there.
The chaos agents can be tempters too.
Yeah.
I
mean, if you're writing this as a series of novels, like you have a very clear progression of like knowledge and understanding of like, you start out in the vault, right? As you're kind of alluding to here. And then like with each subsequent book, you unveil another layer of the political intrigue that's going on until you're eventually like self-actualized enough where you can understand what's truly happening. And then by that point, you're old enough to where your magic doesn't work anymore. And so you're burdened with the principal characters, like burdened with this guilt of being unable to express what's going on to the children themselves.
Yeah. And there's also like the more that you learn, like you start being this like heroic rebellious figure. You're trying to end the war. You're trying to save all these lives and like save the mothers and free people. And then you find out that like, well, if we stop the war, then like all of these tachyonic bombs are going to go off. And what's going to happen then? Like what could possibly happen that's good as a result of that?
Yeah.
What is we said that the whale device, Courtney had suggested that there's some kind of, I don't know, waves that are sent out that they're using for this. So what is it? What was it for?
Yeah, going back to my reconciliation of the twist was that like a kid or group of kids had figured out about the whole council thing and like were trying to indirectly send radio waves as telepathy towards them to like sway them to not be fighting this war anymore.
Oh, to communicate with the old lich.
Yeah, but like make it seem like they're just having these thoughts in their head rather than like direct communication.
It's like psychic warfare.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I think there was also this bit about like sending stuff back in time, right? It's like or they were kind of like their own progenitor, I think is what we had as an idea at some point too.
I think that was with the council last time we talked about how maybe since they can travel in time, like maybe they were almost behind some of this in the first place.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I'm getting that mixed up. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, we could bring back the my reconciliation about those kids with the radio wave telepathy.
So I feel like that's connected to the whale. Because I also think we said the whale device was originally an instrument of the military, like kind of like a Star Wars sort of thing. But I feel like it has a secondary purpose, you know, that children are using or aware of.
We're doing a Star Wars, y'all. We're doing
I mean, maybe it's okay because they have all these time bombs, right? And they're guarding a nuclear holocaust. Perhaps this satellite, really what it does is it monitors the levels of timeness to keep things in place, like from a global perspective. And because of that, it's a massive communication system. So like it's the way they make sure everything stays in stasis. And disrupting that could be a problem because now you won't know and maybe it'll fuck up the way that the time bombs function.
Yeah. Sadly, this makes me think of Westworld in the...
Oh, really?
In like later seasons, there's spoilers for the series.
When it's bad? When it gets bad? Yeah.
So yeah, it was like some kind of ultra supercomputer that was basically like it predicted everything. It controlled everything in the world.
Wow, that does sound like dog shit. Yeah.
It was pretty bad, but I think ours is much cooler.
Yeah, I think ours is not less of a computer, more as a monitor. You know, it's not even controlling the time bombs, but it's giving feedback as to like, oh, this one's about to go. We need to fill it back up or something.
Right.
Like that.
So it's effectively, it's kind of like an ISS as well, right? Like where it's an International Space Station or effectively something that's used by all the players in the world.
Yeah.
But what I think is really interesting as well is that it can be seen as a weapon, right? The propaganda says that it is a weapon, whether it be like, hey, that's our weapon or the enemy's weapon, right? Like, oh, you could very easily have it be like, that is, you know, like the propaganda says that is the weapon that we need to take down. And then you see who's actually behind like the takedown, whether it be people who are truly apocalyptic or people who are true believers. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it there, right?
Yeah, I love that idea that it's part of the Cold War propaganda of like, watch out, guys, the other side has the super weapon. We got to keep fighting. And like all the different sides are saying that exact same thing.
They all use it. Like they all, the geriatric council knows they all rely on it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. All right. I feel like we've come to a good stopping point, right? We've got so many possibilities, so many potentialities. It's fun. It's fun as hell. So a big thank you to Gluax for this particular prompt. And again, two-parter, had a great time. Remember that if you want us to build your world, like we did with the Gluaxes today, then you can always go to our website and submit a prompt. Yes, you can, in fact, submit a prompt, and we will build it within a reasonable amount of time. We're also on YouTube. If you want to go and support us there, you can do it by subscribing and doing all those things. We're on YouTube over World Build with us. Simple as that. We're on Twitter at Let's World Build. We've got a Discord if you want to come chat with us directly or tell us how we fucked up. Oh, I don't know, like the time stuff or the science or the magic. It's magic, y'all. It's fine. It's good. Anyway, you can also, if you're feeling particularly generous, you you can always give us money over on Patreon, where you get access to sweet, sweet patron-only goodies, including Too Hot for Broadcast, the Aphid Lounge, 2 episodes instead of 1 for your prompts, and a patron-only Discord channel. So if you're interested in any of that, or you just want to thank us for all of the years of podcasting, you can go and do that on Patreon. With all of that out the way, that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. Remember that we love you very much. We're going to get through this together. Until next week.